Patrick Dempsey. My pleasure. I'm glad it worked out.
We've been chasing you down for
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been hard to get
totally cool.
everybody organized.
All right, I will occasionally look over here just to make sure everything's going
Sure,
well.
sure.
When I do that, keep talking and keep looking at that.
Copy. Gotcha.
All right, Dr. Dempsey, tell me, how'd you get bit by the racing bug, and when did you first say, I'm no longer a fan, I'm going to actually do this?
Always loved racing. My father was really passionate about racing. He was a team owner. He lived in Maryland before moving to Maine, and he did a lot of short track racing. I think some moonshine running too. I never got a chance to really talk to him. He left me too early. You know, he passed away when I was about 17, so I never got a chance to talk to him about that aspect of it. But through him, I really, it was part of the family dynamic really growing up, because we'd always watch the Indy 500, Monaco Grand Prix, Le Mans, all the big races, anything we could get. That's where it started. And then used to ski race, so always loved racing and speed. And then when I first started dating my wife, she gave me a Skip Barber 3-day competition certificate, and that opened up the door, and really loved it. And then a few years later, I ended up going to Atlanta for a charity event and ran into Don and Dan Panos, and and then I started racing the Esperantes, you know, in the school that was there at Road Atlanta, and that's when it really was like, okay, now I'm in, and this is what I want to do. I did their racing series and then slowly moved up and just got the addiction, and it just didn't stop at that point.
So, road course, not oval?
No, I never did an oval. Always did road courses, always road racing.
What was any reason for that?
It was the easiest the way to get started, to be honest with you. I think that, you know, it was a really, really good program. Joe Foster was the lead instructor with the Panos School. Tough cars to drive, really hot, great track to learn on. And it was really a great opportunity to sort of, okay, this is the dream. Can you kind of go after it? And it gave you the fundamentals that you need and the technique to go on to be successful as a driver. And I think with Skip Barber, which is no longer in the Panos School no more, I mean, those schools were really important.
So did Skip himself personally train you?
No. I didn't meet him until many years later. I think the first school I did was at Laguna Seca. That was another great track. I mean, those old tracks, when we talk about VIR, a certain generation of track that wasn't designed by a computer, but it was just a bunch of guys with a bulldozer going, we're going to go here, and let's turn around that tree, and we'll go straight for about a mile, and then maybe we'll go down this way to slow everybody up for the brakes. But those tracks, to me, have the most soul, and I think that's what's so amazing about VIR is the rhythm of the track, the elevation change, the risk-reward factor. If you go off in certain corners, you're gone. That's your race. You're not going to come back from that. And I think that all adds up to the character and the challenge of these old tracks that you don't see today.
Yeah, as someone once said, before lawyers got a hold of racetrack design, let me just do one thing real quick.
Is the light changing?
No. I just want to double check myself. Looks fine. And we're being very gearhead friendly. I like getting the stuff that the gearheads are going to go for. I mean, guys like me who are kind of ultra mini types, it's like you get me in the cockpit and it's like, wow. You start talking about things. I don't really understand what you're saying, but I wish I did.
Uh-huh.
Kind of thing.
Well, it's always interesting when you work on a documentary because it changes so much depending on the information and the interviews that you get.
It's a journey.
It is a total journey.
It
And you never know where it's going to end up. I mean, when we were doing Hurley, it just, well, the editing process is a phenomenal time to really,
Oh, yeah.
to do the writing.
Well, this started out as a vanity project for Harvey, honestly. And then I said, Harvey, we gotta get some drivers in here. He said, how about Richard Petty? And I said, Richard Petty drove the VIR? I said, yeah, that's why it's called NASCAR Turn. He totaled a car there.
Which, well, really?
On turn number 3, and we're gonna talk to you about, if you want to, a little mishap you had there, but you're in good company there. Because that might have been 2014, I don't know. We'll get to that later.
The final corner, I remember in qualifying, I went down the hill, and yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
That was great. That was an incredible that weekend was phenomenal in 2014.
I think you wound up on the podium.
We did. We ended up starting dead last because of that, but we'll get into it. But
I interviewed Richard Petty, and maybe it's just Harvey, but I said, okay, great, lots of luck getting Richard Petty. Harvey called me and said, next Wednesday.
yeah.
It was cool, because, he had the most flattering things I've ever heard to say about a racetrack. Said VIR was one of his top 2 road courses he's ever been to.
Well, I agree with that. I think that track is really special because of it has character, right? It has a personality onto itself, and it's because you have one person's vision of like what this track is going to be. You know, it's very unique. It's just not this computer generated. Okay, we've got everything thought out. It's just raw and really unique, and you feel that when you're there racing.
So, we're going to get to VIR in just a second. Still looking good. Let's just check my cheat sheet real quick. What do you think? Okay, this is time for you to take a bow. VIR aside, or anything aside, tell us about your accomplishments as a professional racer and the racetracks you've been on, and maybe the most memorable. Because when you talk about doing places like Milan, like, I grew up watching Steve McQueen, and of course James Garvin did Grand Prix and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, now you're actually there on that track and stuff. What are your favorite experiences on any of your road courses you've done?
I remember the first time I did Daytona 24, and it was the night stint, my first night stint, and I was out there with Dario and all the top drivers in the LMP classes or the Daytona prototypes, and I just couldn't believe it as they would swarm around me going through like the bus stop and things like that, and on the banking, and there's this, you're in the moment, but at the same time you step back to look at and to appreciate the moment that you're in from 30,000 feet, and to be out there with these legends and these people that I had such respect for and admiration for, that to me that was really inspiring. And then you're racing too, right? So you're a fan in the car and also a driver in the car, and to be able to do it after watching it for so many years, that was a very special moment. And I knew I had a finite period of time to go racing, and I had specific goals in mind. And when I was checking those off, it was like first time to run Daytona, which was a remarkable experience, Sebring, Watkins Glen, Le Mans, Spa, all those tracks I think are really unique and special. And what I love most about the sport is the camaraderie. I think it's the spirit, it's the competition, the fun, and the mental focus, the meditation, the mindfulness of it. Those are the things that I really love the most. And then running Baja too, off-road racing, that stuff is really fun. Endurance racing, the team effort, and then I learned so much from the sport that I think has really benefited me off the track profoundly.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the life lessons that your racing teaches?
I think gratitude, being able to do it, having the opportunity, how good the people really are that have been in the sport for a long time. They're good, honorable men and women who are kind, generous, but incredibly competitive, ruthless when they need to be, but then it's all over the track. You come together in that camaraderie. The sense of teamwork, certainly through Porsche, working with them, like, here's our objective, what do we need to do to reach that objective, how do we work together to achieve it, really analyzing the strengths and the weaknesses and then going in and working on those and really focusing on the process, and then the outcome of that process will give you the results. And I think those are all the lessons that I think I use in my daily life.
When you talk about good drivers, and I don't want to call them bad drivers, let's just say less successful drivers, what are the qualities that make up the guys that are successful, including maybe some times on the track when you weren't so successful? What really makes a good driver?
I think the mental and emotional discipline, the ability to, I think first of all, they all have just a gift. Like any athlete, anything, they're just born with something special. And then the discipline to make the most of that. You look at the great drivers through history. They worked really hard. They were focused. They sacrificed, and they were one-pointed in their mission. And I think that's what makes a true champion. And that you see through every generation of driver.
All right, let's get to VIR for a second. What's the first time you went to VIR? You remember?
Gosh, it was probably the Coney Challenge. That was the first time I went there in the Rolex series. That was, and then some of the support races. Gosh, I think really early on, maybe 2010 was the first time I was there. And we would test there quite a bit because our shop was in Atlanta or in Brazelton, so that was an easy track for us to go and test.
Tell me what you told me before about getting in there, because I've heard that from quite a few people.
It's just hard to get there, right? It's like you fly in, especially coming from California, you fly in, and then you drive for another 2 hours. Like any of these tracks are out in the middle of nowhere. It's amazing that they're still around, that they haven't been, sold off. And a lot of the tracks, the old tracks have, and the encroachment of development, these tracks are no longer around. So this one is out in the middle of nowhere. Countryside's beautiful, and then you get there, and you go on this journey once you go out the first time, and you're like, where's this going? And then you climb the S's, and then I was racing when the tree was still there, the oak tree, and that was really quite something. You're turning, and the apex is right there, and you got to get down next to the tree. So all those things have these beautiful little reference points, that.
Have you raced since the tree was gone?
Yes, we ended up racing, and then when we got on the podium with Andrew Davis, the base of it was part of the oak tree. So I have that in the garage. So yeah, but it wasn't the same. It was definitely different. That was such a huge part of the character of the track.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
Harley was telling me something about the perspective. Like you get out of the S's, and the tree gave you perspective, but now that hairpin turn kind of sneaks up on you.
Yeah, because that was a point of reference. You could put your eyes there, and you knew where to be looking, getting set up for that straight. Because you got to get you want to get a good run out of that corner, because you have 1.25 miles, I think, to the straight, and then a little bit of a climb, and then a little dip that helps you with the braking, so you can really come in there quite quick. So you want to get a good run out of that corner.
Mm-hmm. What other road courses could you compare, maybe just not necessarily in quality, but just in layout to VIR?
Well, I think it's all those, tracks that were built in the 50s, like Elkhart Lake. Is similar in mentality of how it started, right? They mimicked the road course. They were like, okay, before they built the track, they used to run through town, and they just sort of, okay, how do we make this track similar with a bulldozer? And once again, it wasn't created by a computer. It was just created by these guys that just, here's the vision, here's where we want to go. And it's really special. I mean, so you have Watkins Glen, Laguna Seca, VIR, of course. Even Sebring is bizarre and fun and challenging. And I think if you can do well there and any of these tracks, you can handle anything else, to be honest with you.
So do you know about the history of road course?
Well, a lot of it came from the inspiration, came from all the guys coming back from the Second World War, right? And they were really exposed to road racing in a new way. And of course, they got a lot of cars over there in England and in Germany. And, so that's where that started. And it was just a safer place for people to race because they weren't on the street courses anymore. I mean, proper roads anymore. They were like purpose-built tracks.
I think safety was a bit lax back in
They had no idea about safety. Even now, I mean, You go down, I remember going off in turn one in the wet, and it slopes down, right? And once you hit the grass in the wet, you just pick up speed. And I went down over the hill, and I'm just sitting in the tires, and I'm waiting. I'm like, where is everybody? It's like, does anybody know I'm down here? So the risk-reward factor, I mean, that's part of the challenge of the track. But back in the day, you know, in the first race in '57, I believe Carroll Shelby won in a birdcage, the Maserati. Carl Haas might have been in that race as well. And I couldn't imagine it back then in those days. There were no safety considerations. Of course, look how many people they would lose, you know, in incidents.
Do you, since you did the documentary on Hurley, do you know about Hurley's experience in 1971?
I know. Tell me about.
Well, he's already given it to me. If you knew what I was, just give me something else I can add to it, but it's cool. He just gotten out of the Army. Well, no, excuse me. He was still in the Army. That's right. And Peter Gregg called him and said, okay, let's go to VIR. And so he went down there, and they won it in his Porsche. But anyway, if you don't know the story, that's cool.
Well, I mean, that was the remarkable thing about Hurley and Peter. Those guys that was just great chemistry that came together, and they dominated. You know, and I think that's the thing with endurance racing is having the right chemistry. He taught me so much, Hurley, about racing and what your role is in an endurance race, and to stay within yourself and be consistent. You know, that was the thing. You know, just be consistent.
So let's get into some war stories from VIR. You've got one that I'm thinking of specifically. You just gave me another one. I don't think that was the same one. It was the one from qualifying.
Oh yeah, qualifying. So 2014, great race. You know, all week I got there, first practice, first time in the car. I was like, wow, I'm really feeling comfortable in the car. Car was set up great. It was I was just transitioning from Mazda to Porsche, and I was running with John Wright and his organization. And you know, once you get with Porsche and John, the whole level of concentration, professionalism jumped up like a whole other level. And you just felt really comfortable in the car. I felt really comfortable, brake zones, everything was really working so smoothly, felt really confident, really aggressive, but very calm. Good first practice. Oh, look, we got deer running around outside, which is what you got to be careful of VIR too, because there's so much animal life out there sometimes, you know, in the morning.
I'm doing an interview with VIR, and a turnaround guy says there's a coyote. There was a coyote lumbering across.
Yeah, and I think wasn't VIR where the incident happened, the IndyCar test too, wasn't? Was it Elkhart Lake where the deer on the track? I think there was something like that happened, but that's a different story. So getting back to qualifying, really pushing final lap. I was going to go for it. Had already got a good lap time in. And then I was really aggressive going into the final corner, lost the rear end of the car. I was braking a bit too late, lost in, and just slid down the back. And then just rear end into the tires, and that was it. And with a Porsche, of course, the engine's gone, transmission, everything has to get rebuilt. I just felt so bad. I was like, shit, I'm putting the team in a really bad situation here. And we were going so well. We were really strong. It looked like we were going to have a really good qualifying, at least on the front row or, you know, second row. And I blew it. You know, I was just too greedy and made the mistake. Guys worked all night long. Got the car ready for the start of the race. I think we had to bring in an engine from Atlanta, something like that. Started at the back. I still felt really focused. I remember getting back to the hotel and just reliving the day and trying to put that behind me. I remember reading this book called The Champion's Mind about sort of the mental approach to sport. And when you make a mistake, there's a chapter about letting that go and moving on. And I was like, okay, now I need to make this up in the race. And I just really focused on, okay, well, what do I need to do at the start? Where do I want to be during the start? And I just ran the whole race in my head prior to, you know, at least I had one scenario in my head. And then the race starts, and then you're just dealing with what's happening in front of you. And I just had picked up the rhythm again. I let go of the incident in qualifying and positioned the car when I was done with my stint. Andrew Davis took over, and we ended up finishing on the podium. That was one of the best races of my life, and a really great achievement. It was really fun, and to be able to do it there, I could just feel everything working on the car, and I was ahead on every corner. I had my eyes up. I was really focused and physically in good shape, and it was really, that was a real turning point. I think starting with John Wright and those guys, and my whole level of racing changed, and focus changed completely.
From that way?
Yeah, from that race on, and then we had another great race at Laguna Seca, but we just had an issue happen in the pit stops where I think the gun jammed on a tire change and it cost us. We ended up finishing second there. But yeah, that was when I started to feel for the first time, and this is where I need to be in every race. This is where I need to be mentally. What I need to feel. This is how the car, I can get the most out of the car with this type of setup.
When I was talking to you about great drivers, Hurley told me something that, and let me say this, I'm a filmmaker first and a motorsports fan second, okay? So it's like I've been really, really educated. He told me something I found somewhat surprising, and I was asking about the qualities of a good driver, and he said patience.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're driving 180 miles an hour, it's like, yes, patience. And then he said that VIR rewards patience. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, you can't be too greedy. You have to know when to make an aggressive move. And if you force it and that opening is not there, you could either damage the car, you could lose a position, or you could crash. And he said that to me too. He said, you don't have to go full out. Just get it at a pace and just keep being consistent, because other people will make mistakes. And those are the things. I always would have his voice in my head when I was racing, and any of the great drivers who would give me information, I always would listen to them. And you would try it, and it was like, they're right. It's you just take these little adjustments, and you want to be right up to the rev limiter, but you don't want to go over it emotionally. And that's where the discipline is, keeping the emotional discipline and being patient and setting a car up and going, you know what, how many laps do I have left? Your conversation with the engineer, when do you want to take that risk? And you got to set it up. And 9 times out of 10, when you do that, you'll be successful in overtaking or positioning the car at the right time and the right moment.
You once said,
But that's endurance racing. Sprint racing is a whole different mentality.
you once said, it's a great quote, I love this quote. You said, my TV work is pretty consistent, but racing changes constantly, race to race, lap to lap, moment to moment. Can you elaborate on that?
Right, and I think the other lesson that racing teaches you is to be in the moment. And this is something that we need to do in life, right? Because we're worried about the past or the future, and we sometimes miss where we are right now. And with racing, your situational awareness in your moment and being present is really important, because you're scanning what's happening in front of you, where you're going, who's behind you, especially if you're doing races with multiple classes. You have to have the situational awareness. And every lap, there's something new to look at. The conditions are changing, whether it be the weather or there's been an incident on the track and there's some debris, or something's happened. So the mindfulness of it and the sense of being present is an incredible feeling. It's such a high. And I think this is why people talk about the addiction. It's that. And then the competition and in the sense of choreography with the other classes of how to work together, using the faster cars for a pick so you can get around someone that you're chasing, and using that, and that dialogue on the track, I think is so fascinating.
What does that mean, dialogue?
Because you're communicating with the other cars. You're especially at the bigger tracks with multiple classes. You are indicating where you're going to be so that the faster cars can get by you, and you're communicating. That there's something special about that. And you know where people are. You know who's who, and you know who you can trust and who you can't trust, who's an asshole and who's cool. And the assholes get weeded out pretty quickly, and that's what's so great about the sport.
Feel free to use any colorful language.
I'll try to be disciplined, but.
We interviewed Lynn St. James, and she was the only one who felt free to use her vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're on a track like VIR, and you got another guy you're going against, and he has got the same lap time that you do in qualifying.
Cooper McNeil. So Cooper was always the guy that I would chase, right? You want to have someone that is your nemesis in the sense on the track, in a good way, because that's who you compare yourself to, like your teammate or something like that. You have one person usually that is driving you, that you're like, I want to beat him so badly. Cooper was always a good sport with that, and we still get along very well, and he was always very competitive, and it was always inspiring for me.
Well, how do you beat him, though?
Well, you just look at your data, and the data never lies, and you just have to be, okay, I need to get into the brake zone there. And then seat time, and then if the car is set up right. But it drives you, it fuels you, it gives you a little bit of fire in your stomach to get, riled up, if you will, and someone to attack. That's why you look at this season in Formula One. I mean, those guys love each other as much as they want to kill each other on the track. I mean, they really are inspired by each other because it's bringing out the best in you. You need that competition. You need that person to chase.
But I tell you, Skip Barber's take on it was when he brought up the same situation on a track like VIR. He said, "Okay, you got the same lap time, but it's got so much diversity that it could very well be that there are certain corners and places that you can take the advantage."
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's certain corners that just fit your personality, and you can get through them very quickly. And then there are some tracks, like for me, Texas and Austin. Getting the S's the way they are, the second sector in that is always very tricky. And if you don't get that right, you're off. Your rhythm is off. And VIR is a rhythm track. I felt in 2014 I got the rhythm right consistently. Even if I made mistakes, I rebounded very quickly and could reset and get back into the rhythm. So there are certain corners I could get out of much quicker than, say, Cooper or somebody else like that, and that would make a big difference. And I knew I had that section of the track, that area to get through where I could make up some time.
So I don't know the last time you were there, but can you take me around the track for a second and tell, are there certain, maybe not the entire track, but certain places where you're like, here's how I would approach this?
Well, the S's are the most exciting, right? Because that's really, as a driver, you need to be flat and not lift, and you make up the most time, and it's exhilarating when you nail it. And if you don't, that's when you're going to lose a lot of positions. And to me, once I hit that section, everything else went smoothly.
So I had my little fantasy when I went up to just to cover some stuff a while back. It was a club day, but they were racing. The guys in the VIR club and stuff. And the guy says, "You want to go?" And I've been wanting to do this for 12 years. And I said, "Sure." And it's not a hot lap. I got into a race. It was an actual race, fender to fender, bumper to bumper, and I caught the bug. At that point in time. But what I found daunting were on the front straight turns 1, 2, and 3. The one, including the one where you had a little mishap and stuff.
Yeah, it was in the wet, so it was in the wet, and I went into the braking, and I was just too aggressive, too hard on the braking. I wasn't sensitive enough, and I went off into one. But as you go into one, it's at double apex going around, and then you have the left-hander, then a little kink, and then another left-hander, and then you get set up to the right, left, right, and then up through the S's. And that's a rhythm section right there. Because there's a little short shoot where you can get, before I think you go into 3, you can get a place to overtake in there. It's a good place to kind of get somebody under braking.
Okay, all right.
And it's just so naturally beautiful there, too. It's old farm country.
Is that unusual for some of the other courses you've been to?
Not that generation of track, no. I mean, Watkins Glen's very similar. It's out in the middle of nowhere. VIR. And Sebring, of course, is another place that's hard to get to.
So when Harvey resurrected this place, it was, and when you see the documentary, you'll see, it was literally a county.
It was just overgrown. Everything had encroached on the front straight. There were trees right there. They had to clear all of that. It'd been, 20, 30 years since they'd raced in there. So they had to redo everything, the infrastructure, all of it. The basic layout was the same, but they started from scratch, basically.
He told me that he had gone to a ski resort, Deer Valley, I think it was. And he said, which you're probably familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Is that Park City?
Yeah, Park City and then Deer Valley. I think Penske owned that for a number of years, just sold it on the last year. So, yeah, we go there every year for skiing. You see a lot of drivers there around the wintertime.
what he said was, he said he was skiing there, and it was like, they have like tissues and Kleenex, and they have clean bathrooms, and they have clean, and he said, why can't we have a racetrack like this? Because road courses are kind of like the redheaded stepchild, but there's not, you know, there's not a lot of facilities. So he said, we're gonna have facilities here. My question is, does that matter to a racer? Does that add to the experience? Like, does that add to your VIR experience? Because I had a young guy, Dylan Murray, he said, VIR is not just a road course, not just a racetrack, he said, it's an experience. So I'm curious.
Well, that was the intention, right? It's a country club where people can go and enjoy their cars in a safe environment where they can have the camaraderie. And then, you know, there's the infrastructure in there where you have a nice day, where you can have a nice meal, you have a nice place to stay. All those things are really important. Well, we just lost the clouds. I guess the weather changed here. No, it was funny the way the clouds changed.
Yeah, I just saw that. Okay, go ahead.
But, yeah, I remember I met Patrick Long we were in Italy testing and getting ready for Le Mans that year. I think this is probably 2014, yeah. And at the track, everything shut down for an hour. And you went and you had a proper meal with plates, pasta, you know, and then you had a little bit of a break after. And there was something so civilized and so much fun about that experience where you take the time and you enjoy the meal and you get back to work and you get into the car. And I think that's sort of that European mentality, certainly with road racing, is nice to see at VAR and some of these tracks, and certainly the club tracks now, is that it's part of that experience. And because you're looking at the professional drivers and the crews, they're on the road for over 250 days a year. All those little things make a big difference. And you look forward to going back to tracks like that have the infrastructure where it's a comfortable place to stay, there's good food. It just makes it it just makes it a better experience, better quality of life. And it's rare, it doesn't happen all the time. There you go. Got it.
So, sorry. Okay. I guess simply put, what do you love about racing? What is it that?
I think it's the personal challenge within yourself. You're only racing yourself and how far you can go. And it's a question of how deep can I go into that corner? How quickly can I get on the throttle and get the most out of that corner? And I think it's going into your own fear and your own insecurities, and that's it. That's one aspect of it. And I think the camaraderie is just really something special. There's a bond after you get out of the car after a really good race that brings you really, there's an intimacy, there's a connection with your fellow competitor. There's a satisfaction in that it's hard to find anywhere else. It's just exhilarating. I mean, to be racing that close with somebody so cleanly, it's really, that there's something in that. There's a beautiful poetry in it.
Poetry. I think Paul Newman said there's a grace to it.
Yeah, there's an elegance to it. There's a rhythm to it. There's a way of racing with someone and knowing, okay, if I let you in here, then I can overtake you here. It's like a ballet. It's a dance. There is a dialogue with the car.
I've heard sometimes you make friends on the track while you're going 180 miles an hour.
Yes.
And is that true?
Yeah, you do. You connect, you communicate, and there's humor out there too. Because people are talking to you. There's little subtle cues. Either they're talking to you with your hand, or you're looking, or you're indicating with your blinker, but you're working with people out there. You know, there are people that you can partner with, and there are people that you can't.
I interviewed Marco Andretti last week.
Uh-huh.
He is most definitely throttle happy when he talks about the adrenaline rush. Then I talked to Hurley. Hurley's like talking almost to a professor. You know, because he's so low key, and he's also one of the legendary drivers of all time. His approach seems to be more cerebral. I'm curious what your approach is to racing.
Well, Hurley worked with me quite a bit. You know, he was very kind to me very early on and gave me some great advice. And I think he was always like, stay calm, you know. And he would always give me gum. He goes, take the gum. The gum would allow me to chew. I'm always chewing gum, and it was because of Hurley. Because number one, it keeps you from getting a dry mouth, and you know, sometimes back in the day when he was ready, there was no water in the car, right? So it helped keep some moisture, and it helped take some of the anxiety and the pressure out. But little things like that, he's like, you know, visualization. Stay within yourself. Don't be 110%. Be 90%, and give yourself a little bit of room, and be thoughtful. You know, okay, what do I really need to do to win this race? And with an endurance race, you don't want to make mistakes. You need to be consistent. You need to stay on track. You need to be careful with the equipment. And that's how he approached it. And not letting your emotions take over. That's when you make the mistake.
Can adrenaline get you in trouble?
Absolutely.
Has it gotten you in trouble?
Oh, of course. Early on, I think, you know, and then the more experience you have, the more relaxed you get, the more your instincts just come through. You're not thinking. As a young driver or an inexperienced driver, you're thinking and then you're reacting. The experienced drivers are just reacting. It's all intuitive at that point because it's been they've been trained. You know, they've had the hours to master it. And those are the things that I think as a young driver or beginning driver, the hardest things to learn until you make those mistakes and then you learn.
All right. Final word. This is the tear-inducing finale where we will that I'll end the whole show with just a tribute to VIR, the place that it is, what it means to you, what racing means to you, and how it makes you feel.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing and the thing that moves you most about VIR is the history. When you think about it and when you make the approach and you go down through the gate and you're driving down into the paddock, I've always flooded with memories of the past and images and moments where I wish I could go back to 1955 when they first looked at the idea of making a track there, being at the first race in 57 and seeing Carroll Shelby and all the legends of that era. All that, anytime I went to a racetrack, and particularly VIR, I would always be flooded with those memories. And then could you be a part of that history? Would I be able to make my mark and be a part of it? Because it meant so much to me personally. I got so much out of the sport and from the people and the manufacturers and all of those things. And we're now in a really interesting transition where we're moving into the future because we have to be conscious of our environment and what's happening, and certainly the land there and the nature, and where will racing be in the next 50 years? What will we see with, you know, the e-racing and, you know, with the battery? I think people will always want to race. It's can we do it without such a huge impact on the environment? And that's the challenge. And that ultimately is what Porsche is doing and what manufacturers are doing with Formula E. All that technology through racing is making it to the street car. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember about motorsport, is that its contribution to society, you know, and just the camaraderie is beautiful.
So I got it. You got anything else? If you got anything about the history of VIR that you know about offhand or anything you want to say?
I think it was a really magical time, and you know, certainly 55 was a very deadly year in motorsport, but it was really at the height of motorsport of that generation. Was really growing so rapidly. Tracks like that era, we'll never see that again.
The names on the walls. I mean, you know, Roger Penske won there.
Yeah, all the great names that have been there, and that circuit and the circus that travels around the country. There's the nomadic life of the race teams and the drivers and the camaraderie, because you spend so much time together. People have sacrificed so much for the sport. You know, they don't see their kids growing up, or they miss certain moments in their life because they're so committed to the sport. And that's what I think brings everyone together, because they do it because they're passionate about it. They want to be there, and it's infectious. And you're around all like-minded people who love it, you know, and there's something special about that. I remember the driver meetings that we would have at VIR before the race, and the camaraderie and all of that. I would always look around and just be so grateful to be there, to be a part of it for this moment in time.
Yeah. People don't think about the social aspect of it, but it is, yeah.
You spend so much, I mean, it's like, filmmaking is the same, where you sit around and you wait, right? You know, there's these intense periods of work and focus, and then it's just nothing for a period of time and boredom. And it's like you have a lot of time to get to know each other. Of course, you're traveling, you're seeing each other on planes, or you're sharing cars to get to the racetrack. You get to know each other. You get to see people at their best and their worst, and you know, you get to know someone in a very deep way, in a very meaningful way, and sometimes you lose people, and that's hard, you know. It makes you reevaluate, why are we doing this? But then you get back up and you got to do it. It's just something that, it's an addiction. It's a high like nothing else.
And I guess the only other thing is, another thing Harvey was a stickler about when resurrecting is the attitude of the people that run VIR and how they treat you, me, everybody.
Well, there's so much pride in the track and the resurrection of the track and bringing it back, and the hospitality, in the kindness, and how they would host that event, you know. And that's really important from everyone you come in contact with, the people that are telling you where to park or where you can't park, and that consciousness and culture is so important because it sets the tone for the drivers, the teams, and for the fans. It feels like you're coming home.
I think that's a great end of it. I think that's great. All right. Anything else?
All good.
You good? All right. I got one other piece of business. Quickly, if you don't want to do this, that's okay. As long as I'm here. My sister's a big fan.
What's her name?
Bet.
Bet?
Bet Osborne. Her birthday's coming up.
Okay.